Oh, before you watch the chapter, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Is that it?
Okay, so it's good that you've never seen the show. So this is very fresh now. I like this more. So how I start is a very basic, but hopefully a question you would specifically appreciate, which is, I say, hello, doctor, and how are you really doing?
I'm doing always well. At least as far as I can remember.
Why would you use the word always? Isn't it a difficult word to use?
Yeah, so, I don't fluctuate between happiness and sadness. My favorite word, you would say, is equanimity.
Equanimity. Can you please explain?
Unflappable or at peace.
Okay. And have you always been this way, doctor?
No, I don't think so. But last 20 years at least, yeah.
I'm curious about your answer because if you're with equanimity, is that the word, correct? Or unflappable?
No, unflappable is not quite accurate. It's close. Equanimity means beyond the fluctuations of melodrama.
But when you were saying that, I was thinking, doctor, does that mean you, as much as you won't go to, let's say, the negative, which is sadness or disappointment or frustration or stress, does that mean you will also avoid overjoy and ecstatic energy and big celebrations?
No, there's a difference between joy, ecstasy, and happiness. So happiness is the opposite of sadness. Joy is fundamental, and you see it in a child, in a baby. And ecstasy is transcendence. So ecstasy is even beyond joy. Ecstasy means ektasis, stepping out of space-time and causality. So happiness is always for a reason. Joy is for no reason. And ecstasy is when you find out that you don't have an identity.
Interesting. It's interesting because my second question is connected to that. I was going to ask, who is Deepak?
You must be familiar with Rumi, right?
No, not much. Very, very briefly.
Yes, Jalaluddin Rumi, the Sufi poet, 13th century, so more than 700 years ago. He was asked, who are you? He said, define me and label me. You'll starve yourself of yourself. Nail me down in a box with cold words. That box will be your coffin. I don't know who I am. I'm your own voice echoing off the walls of God. So who am I? It's just a perspective of the one who asked the question. Actually, none of us knows who we are. We identify ourselves with our name and our biography. You can find that on LinkedIn, but if I go on LinkedIn, I won't know who you are.
It's interesting because I saw a clip about you, and I'm so happy that I quickly was skimming through the research, and the clip connected, and it was with you and Oprah, and you were describing the difference between self-image and self-esteem.
Correct.
And how you learned from Rita, I believe, your wife, the definition of self-esteem or how to work on self-esteem. And you were talking about how people would go through I don't want to put your words, so you can interrupt me at any point. You're talking about people who do plastic surgeries because of the self-image that they have of themselves, rather than work on the self-esteem. So I don't know, I connected with that video when you were just talking about who are we, and who are we if it's the perspective of somebody.
Self-image is basically your selfie. We confuse ourselves for our selfies. And this body-mind ego is your selfie. It's not who you are. Your self is beyond that. Now, self-esteem is connecting to that part of yourself where you feel beneath no one, but also superior to no one, where you don't have fear because fear comes from your self-image, from your selfie. Does it look good? Doesn't look good. And you're immune to criticism, but also to flattery.
I'm enjoying this already. And you reminded me of something I actually spoke to, and I would love your point on this as a student listening. I was talking to my mother recently, and she was saying, because I think I was stopped a few times and people told me, how nice the show is. So she asked me, how do you feel? I told her, when somebody criticizes me, I'm like, okay, your opinion, cool, it's fine. And when somebody even flatters me or gives me a compliment, I'm like, thank you for a sweet moment, I'm appreciative. And then I move like, because I told her, it's because I know my value. I don't need somebody outside. Yes, when they do, it's an extra and I'm appreciative. And without their support, we can't do much, me or you. If people don't buy your book, we can't spread. However, we should also know our own worth. And these are bonuses. Getting a clap or a compliment or a nice comment. It's nice, but it should not make you.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. What you just said is true self-esteem. If you feel personally offended by criticism, then you'll be offended for the rest of your life. You'll be at the mercy of every stranger on the street. But if you're flattered by every compliment, you'll also be on the mercy of every stranger on the street. The two go together, just like happiness and sadness. Life is an experience of contrast. At least our so-called personal life is, you can't have an up without a down, or a hot without a cold. So it's the same with emotions. You can't have happy emotions unless you contrast them with the opposite. So if you close your eyes and do nothing, you'll become aware very immediately that you're having a conversation with yourself. Now, it's a great mystery who this entity is that never stops speaking to itself, never shuts up. Even in sleep, dreams, this conversation is going on. In waking state, of course, it's very obvious, the conversation. We call it the internal dialogue. So if you close your eyes and you listen to your internal dialogue, it's telling you stories. And basically, it's stories of the past, memories, which also project as possible future imaginary desires. Now, in India, they call this karma, although most Indians don't actually have a deep understanding of karma. But karma simply means past experience and how you interpret it, not even past experience, how you interpreted the experience. Because you and I can have the same experience, but our interpretation might be different. So the word karma simply means action. That's all it means. So every experience generates a memory, and then you have an interpretation of the memory, a narrative, story. Incidentally, only Homo sapiens does this. Okay. So if the story is sad, then you feel unpleasant sensations in the body. If the story is happy, then the sensations are pleasurable. So those who actually understand this, they call this body the conceptual body or the karmic body, because there's no such thing as a body. If you say I have a body, then which one? You began as a fertilized egg, then you were a zygote, then you were an embryo, then you're a baby, toddler, young boy, girl, teenager, middle age, all the way to dusty death. So what we call a body is a concept. It's not a real thing, it's a verb, it's an activity, it's a process. And the process is in what we call awareness. Awareness is not the process. The awareness of the body is not the body. Okay. Just like the awareness of the mind is not the mind. Awareness is fundamental, but we're never in touch with awareness. We're only in touch with the body and the mind. So this is a conceptual body. Now, if you go behind this story, no story, there is another body. And that is the bliss body. But bliss not in the terms of, taking ecstasy or a drug. Bliss is equanimity, and behind that is ecstasy. So, we only look at physical stuff and we think that's real. But anything physical, including this chair, is actually not real. It's a perceptual activity which is very transient. It's a dream. If I asked you what happened to your childhood, you'd say it's a dream. But what about yesterday? It's a dream. What about 5 minutes ago? What about this morning? What about these words? By the time you hear them, they don't exist. So everything you see is actually a concept. It's not real. What is real is the awareness in which this whole process is going on. Once you get to that level, all this becomes unimportant. That's joy. That's equanimity. That's ecstasy. That's also laughter, by the way, because laughter is comfort with ambiguity, paradox, contradiction, unreality.
Does equanimity have anything correlated to living in the moment and in the present?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The point of arrival is always now. You can't escape now. You can't get out of now. So now is timeless. Now is a moment that never ends and is always the point of arrival. You can't go where you already are. But people try to, and that's why they're unhappy.
Yeah, Doctor, I heard a beautiful saying, I honestly don't know by who, but I repeat it so much. I'm sure the audience is tired of it, but I love it. And it said, living in regret is living in the past, living in anxiety is living in the future, and living at peace is living in the moment.
That's true. So what is stress? Stress is the anticipation of the future and regret of the past. And in a very, Western science, biological science defines stress as perception of threat, which is not a bad definition, but it's actually resistance to existence, the opposite of flow. So either you're in resistance or you're in flow.
Okay.
Now all you have to do is watch a gazelle or a cheetah or a bird or an eagle. You know what flow is. Or a whale. Humans are very interesting creatures. We've become biological robots.
What do you mean?
A biological robot is an algorithm, no creativity. So the essential nature of our consciousness or awareness beyond the conditioned mind is it's creative. When we talk about God or whatever the mystery is, we call it the creator, right? It's a creativity is fundamental reality, and the human mind is divided, conditioned by culture. Well, not that culture is bad, it has a lot of richness, but it does condition you to what's within the culture, or religion, or philosophy, or science. They're limiting because they work within certain domains. And particularly science now is totally algorithmic. We think everything is an algorithm, including our own body, including our own mind, and we have become like that. So we are biological robots, imprisoned by the conditioned mind, what the great poet William Blake called mind-forged manacles, imprisoned. But we can't see them. Handcuffs that we cannot see. Opposite of creativity. Creativity is not an algorithm, it's disruption. These days when people talk about new technologies, they say disruptive, or entrepreneurs who are disruptive. To some extent, a true entrepreneur or a true creative mind is disruptive. It's not an algorithm. You break. There's a mathematical theorem for this. It's called Gödel's theorem, named after a German mathematician, contemporary of Einstein. He said, if you have a series of theorems, suddenly in the middle of the theorem, you'll find a theorem that you can't explain. It just crops up in the mathematician's mind. Intuitively, the mathematician knows it's right, but he can't prove it. Now, if he accepts it, then he can continue with the algorithm, he or she. But if they don't accept it, then they're stymied. So Gödel's theorem suggests that nature is creative, not an algorithm. Even evolution, that's an argument for evolution against Darwinian evolution, that evolution is punctuated by creativity. 99% of your DNA, genetic code, almost 99%, 98 point some percent, is the same as a primate, or the same as a monkey. But monkeys don't have a Shakespeare or an Einstein or a Rumi. There's some creative leap there, which current evolutionary biologists don't accept. They should, but they don't. They will one day, maybe.
When you use the word Dr. Flow, you reminded me of, I love sports documentaries a lot.
Yes.
And I love sports even when I was a bit younger. And I saw recently a Formula One documentary, and the driver said that at some point he didn't feel he was in his body, and he wasn't thinking. He was in a state of flow, as he called it. And he was just flowing with the track, no accident. Every turn, every moment is because, one reason can be because he practiced so much, one reason can be God knows what. But he reached a point where he doesn't need to, he's in flow. And this, it's a term that's been repeated recently a lot, a state of flow, maybe even a writer or a director or a speaker or a philosopher. And it's when you, I don't know, it's when you surrender to that.
Flow is when the observer and the observed, when the sphere and the scenery, when the driver and the automobile and the driving, when the lover and the beloved become one. And then there is loss of personal identity. There's a slowing of time. Great athletes like the Formula One driver or a great football player or any great athlete, they don't think they're playing, they're being played out. The game is playing them instead of them playing the game. So time slows down. There is no personal identity, there's no ego identity. It's a religious experience, actually. When you and the mystery, whatever we call it, become one, that's transcendence. So flow is transcendence. No time, no sound, no even perceptual experience is there is no observer. There is no observed. There's only the observing. There's no singer, there's no song, there is only the singing. There's no lover, there's no beloved, there's only the love. Okay, it's a religious experience. If you look at, I'm not talking about religious doctrine or religious theology, but the religious experience is actually that. Any religion, the original experience, you know. Angel Gabriel appears to Muhammad and he says, recite, and the Quran comes out. He doesn't know how to read or write, so where does he get it from? And it not only reveals truth, as they say, but it's melodic, it's poetic, it's onomatopoeia, where the sound echoes the sense. That's flow. Okay, so religious experience is that, number one. Number two, out of that comes Platonic truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And the third component is loss of the fear of death. That's why this Formula One guy, whoever he was, there's no thought. It's transcendence. Death doesn't exist.
And what you said is right, doctor. A lot of athletes say that when they are in this state, everything slows down. It's literally what you said.
And they can't hear the noise. The crowd is going crazy. They can't hear the noise.
I guess that's being very
silence.
In the moment.
It goes beyond all. It's transcendence of all perception. There's only the perceiving, no perception. So that's actually what people yearn for. That's also called love. Love is not a sentiment. It's the ultimate truth. The observer and the observed are the same entity. Every observation actually creates a new observer. So when I came into your studio, that was a different me. And this is a different you. But we hang on to a fixed identity. That's the problem.
The first impression.
Yeah. Again, Rumi, he says, can you step out of the river of memory and conditioning and see the world as if for the first time?
Do you believe, doctor, that the more open we are, and maybe it sounds too basic, but I hope it's not, the more open, literally, our heart and our mind is the more open, and the more we experience, and the more we travel, and the more we meet people, the less judgmental we become, and the less prejudiced we become by default?
Yes. I would say the maximum diversity of experience with no labels, judgments, definitions, resistance. There's either flow or there's resistance. That's it. All conflict in the world is resistance.
All conflict is resistance.
Resistance to what is. Resistance to your opinion. Resistance to your idea. Resistance to your doctrine. Resistance to your politics.
I have a question that I would love to know your opinion on. I'm coming up with a lot of new questions in my mind while we're sitting. Why do you think that human beings, whether in a relationship, let's call it a love relationship, whether it's in a job where they ask for a job description, and going back to the love relationship, they will ask, what are we? Who am I to you? You know, when somebody wants to know, like structure or label. Why do human beings have this extreme insecurity and need to label things and to compartmentalize them according to the boxes they have in their mind?
It's a difficult question, but there is an answer. You asked, why do human beings, right? Because this is a very human thing. According to deep historians, around 30,000 years ago, there were 8 different types of humans. Homo sapiens means the wise ones. We gave ourselves that name out of humility or hubris. Either we are the wise ones. Then we named the other humans, you know. Neanderthals, Florences, on and on. There were 8 different kinds of humans. And like other animals, they had only a language for either mating, reproduction, food, or danger, which is what we need for survival. That's, if you go to the Serengeti, that's what you see. You know. But then one species, we, reasons unclear, evolutionary leap, we created a language for stories. We're the only species that has a narrative for everything. This chair, it's a narrative. It's not a chair, actually, it's a sensation more than anything else. It's a perceptual activity in consciousness. But you know, baby wouldn't know this is a chair. If it looked at it, color, shape, form, sensation, smell. This is how animals operate. We created a language for story. Money, it's a language, it's a narrative, you know. Otherwise, before that, you cut my hair and I'll make you an omelette or whatever. I'll fix your shoes. It's too inconvenient. So let me make a story. Okay, here's this shell, this piece of copper, or now a piece of paper. Now it doesn't even have to be a piece of paper, digital code somewhere. Crypto. Stories. So, you know, once we created stories, we created empires. We created nation states, latitude, longitude, Greenwich Mean Time. It's not Basra Mean Time. Colonialism. Why not Botswana Mean Time? Stories, right? But everybody accepts the story and we call it reality. And the stories, actually, you know, there's some truth to the Old Testament fall from grace. You know, when the Creator tells Adam and Eve, thou shalt not take the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. What is that? It's a story, right? This is good, this is bad. That created the human conflicted mind. But it also created what we call the human universe. Everything you experience right now is a human universe, including the Milky Way galaxy. That's a story. Okay? There's no such thing as a Milky Way galaxy. There's only a sensation in consciousness. You call it or my body, or this chair. These are stories. And so once you have a story, then you have to defend your story. Okay, because that's what humans do right now. Ukraine, Russia, they're defending their stories and they're killing each other. Okay, it's madness. If you don't agree that the world is insane, then you're declaring your own insanity right now. So that's what happens in relationship and everything. The only relationship that survives ever is a relationship of love without a story.
Is that even possible?
Yes, that's ultimate love, yes. It can be for anyone. It doesn't have to be for a person. It can be for an idea. It can be for the mystery of our existence. I mean, if you don't... existence is the most inexplicable mystery. There's no explanation for why there's space-time or causality, why this theater of space. Why do you exist? You know, you can make up reasons, right? But if existence is not a surprise to you, then your humanity is incomplete. You should be perpetually surprised that you exist. It's and once existence is inexplicable, that means everything is inexplicable. When the fundamental fact of existence remains a mystery, then everything is a mystery. And if you surrender to that mystery, then you have love. True love.
So, if I rewind to the question, the main challenge for people to label things, if I gather everything you just said, it's because they're trying to explain something that is inexplicable, or they need
they're trying to create. We make models of reality because we don't know what reality is. So that's a Higgs boson. Okay, you do this fancy experiment in a hadron collider that costs billions of dollars. You observe a particle, and by the time you observe it, it doesn't exist. And then you create a whole technology around it. I mean, this is the remarkable thing about humans, is we have created technology. We've created missiles, but we've intergalactic probes, the internet, and it doesn't stop. Virtual reality. What we don't realize is we are already living in a virtual reality. So what we are extending is the range of possibilities in a simulation that we have created. We call it the human universe. We call it this body. Okay. This is a very remarkable thing about humans. The divided mind leads to pleasure and pain, leads to concepts like birth and death, leads to fear, but also the opposite. Courage and fear go together. You don't, or hope and despair. People say, do you have hope? I think whenever you are, in a way it's an oxymoron, because hope implies despair, right? If you don't have despair, why do you need hope? You have to be independent of both. That's where the reality is. Same thing, which we were talking about earlier.
Okay, if I ask more about you now, about...
But I told you, I don't know who I am.
No, I wanted to ask about your childhood. How was
childhood?
it?
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, my father was trained cardiologist. He trained in England. He was part of the British Army during the Second World War. He was ADC to Lord Mountbatten. At one time, he was a physician to the current Queen. So he was very accomplished. When there was a war going on between India and China, he was up in the Himalayas measuring heart pressures. He was one of the first people to describe high altitude mountain sickness. He was an adventurer. My mother was very simple. She didn't actually have a college education, but she was a storyteller. And she would tell us stories, me and my brother. And every night she would sing the stories, but she always left us with a cliffhanger. So, the hero is defeated, the villain is willing, the girl is abandoned the hero. Now she says, it's all dismal. I want you to dream the ending by the time you wake up in the morning. Make it a happy ending and make it a love story.
How interesting.
So that was the contrast between my father and my mother.
And your relationship with them, how was it?
It was very good, different. But I mean, my mother was very interesting because it was all about stories, which is, they say now, to be human is to have a story.
It's also interesting, if I go back to your last answer before the childhood, how you made me think how human beings love creating simulations within our simulation.
Within the simulation.
We have many small ones.
This is a simulation where we are, including your body. How do you know you have a body? If you close your eyes, the body disappears. All you have is sensations. And then you open your eyes and you think there's a world, but that's a sensation. It's color. Color, shape, and form go together. So the difference between this and this is just color. That's all we experience. But then there's a story. That's a shoe, that's a pair of jeans, this is a hand. We are actually, in a way, we are divine and diabolical, both. That's creativity, it's both divine. You make nuclear weapons and cyber warfare, and now biological warfare, but then you can also create amazing music or poetry or literature, or actually science that understands the mystery or tries to understand the mystery
Which is also beautiful
about
the human brain. We're always seeking knowledge and answers, and it's a continuous
the human consciousness. The brain is an artifact. The brain is an experience in consciousness.
Is it true, doctor, that we use like 10 to 11% of the brain?
Say that again?
Is it true that we use only 10 to 11%?
No, that's a myth. We use 100% of the brain. We just use it incorrectly.
Okay. Well, that's another topic.
Yeah.
I have a career question. I saw in my research that so many celebrities would go to you during your journey. Michael Jackson, Marlon Brando, Elizabeth Taylor. I even saw a video by Lady Gaga. She was very touched, I think, by the influence you've had in her life. So my first part of the question is, why would all these celebrities come to you or look for you?
I would call it the wisdom of insecurity. Without insecurity, there's no creativity. So they have, but when it goes overboard, then it leads to suffering. Because if you're very accomplished as an actor or singer, you get attached to your last hit. And if it doesn't happen again, you are tormented. So great artists are tormented souls as well. And I think that's the only reason I can give. They are tormented souls.
That's interesting. And you know, the doctor, the main purpose or the slogan that we placed for this show is it's to discover the human behind the title. So technically all these labels and accolades, even as Dr. Deepak, it's to delve into you and how you think and how your childhood was. And when you do that and then you read the comments, people connect to humanity because they realize you're also a human being. You also have, you know, joys and achievements and sadness and struggles.
It's an evolutionary process, though.
What do you mean?
Well, hopefully you're not the same person you were when you were 8 years old. If you are, then you should run for president in the United States anyway. So we're evolving physically, emotionally, ultimately spiritually.
Is Dr. Deepak extrovert or introvert?
Introvert.
Introvert. Is Dr. Deepak social or antisocial?
I wouldn't say antisocial because that's a negative connotation, but I'm not a social person. I'm not socially engaged. On stage or, you know, when I'm giving a talk, I'm present, and I'm present when I meet someone. But do I enjoy going to a cocktail party or a dinner celebration? Not really.
Optimistic or pessimistic?
Independent of both.
Yeah, now we connect your equanimity.
Yeah.
That's my new word now. What was the hardest decision so far for you?
The hardest decision was a long time ago. You know, when I was, I trained in internal medicine, endocrinology, neuroscience. And then I took a leap. I mean, I realized that what I was doing was very mechanistic and it was a risk. My wife asked me, where's the money going to come for the mortgage, or how are the children going to go to school? So I took a leap, I took a risk. It was hard. It was also at that time, I was vilified by the medical establishment, especially when I wrote the book Quantum Healing. There was a lot of criticism. And, there was a loss of so-called reputation in the mainstream medical circumstances. But fortunately, it worked out. I wrote a book and it became a bestseller, and then it happened.
It steered your life.
Yeah, it changed my life.
So interesting. Otherwise, you would have maybe been just a good doctor.
That's it.
Somewhere.
Yeah. I remember spending all night reading EKGs and smoking cigarettes and getting stressed out and all of that. Now, of course, you can get an EKG on here in a minute.
Correct. Why do many people think you're controversial, or some people?
I think I am controversial, right? Anytime you say something that doesn't conform to people's ideology or philosophy or science, then you become controversial.
So you're fine with it.
Yeah.
I think you need it. I think humanity needs it, because if everybody just goes with the tide, you don't progress. You don't look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's what I say. Biological robots, we're algorithms. You eat, you sleep, you have a family, you raise kids, you get old, you get heart disease, and you die. It's a pretty boring life.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Why do you think, doctor, and I don't know the stats, so I'm not gonna act like I do, but feeling-wise or perception-wise of what I'm seeing online and the articles, and the internet helps to deliver information, why do you think, if true, that currently the younger people or the younger generations seem to have more stress and more anxiety and more issues with self-image and more plastic surgery and more, disconnect with self and not happy, nothing is okay for them? I don't know if this is true, this whole statistic.
No, it's true. It's the hypnosis of social conditioning. That's what it is. Everybody's in a rush to conform, and everybody's in a rush to prove themselves. Everybody's in a rush to get the best grades, the best, everything. You have to be by comparison. Everything is by comparison. Our education system is also messed up. It's information overload. And if I want information, I can go to Google now. I don't need information overload. The word education comes from two roots: edu core, to bring out what is at the core of a human being. The great Indian poet Tagore said, every child born is proof that God has not given up on humans so far. But we mess it up through education. And that this is I would say the Judeo-Christian idea of education that is being imposed on the whole world. And its symbol is the necktie, which I call a phallic symbol that strangles you of that old colonial dominance. And we're being run by it, and we don't realize it, What did it mean to be in the desert and to look at the stars? Who talks about it? What did it mean to be rich in experience without holding on to it every moment? No such thing anymore. So it's true. I think we are, honestly, if I have to be totally honest with you, we are sleepwalking to extinction with climate change, mechanized ways of killing, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, cyber warfare, extinction of species, destruction of the ecosystem, poison in the food chain. It's a prescription for extinction. They say if insects disappeared from our planet, life would cease on this planet in 5 years. If humans disappeared from this planet, life would flourish in 5 years. Be back to the Garden of Eden. So from nature's point of view, we are the cancer. We are multiplying, we are gouging, metastasizing, and destroying our host. We call it the environment, but it's not the environment. This air is your breath. The rivers and waters are your circulation. The trees are your lungs. The stars give you the atoms in your body. 50% of the atoms in your body are not even from the Milky Way galaxy. They're from other galaxies sucked by gravitational wind. 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, uncountable trillions of planets. Based on current calculations of what they call the Goldilocks zone, there could be 60 billion habitable planets in just the Milky Way galaxy. So planet Earth is not even a speck of dust in all the beaches. The other day I went to a beach and actually tried to grasp one speck of sand. It's ungraspable. Goes with the wind. On this planet is a species calling itself the wise ones that is sleepwalking to extinction. It's the ultimate hubris. So either we have to wake up or we're doomed.
Yeah, a lot of people say how we're the cancer. A lot of people say how we're the cancer on Earth.
We are.
Earth is fine.
The Earth is
We're the ones destroying it.
correct. And the Earth will be fine, ultimately.
Yeah.
Might need us to go the way dinosaurs went. The last time there was an extinction, dinosaurs, 65 million years ago, when a meteorite fell on this planet. But the next extinction would be humans creating it. You just need one crazy guy right now, anywhere in the
It's
world.
scary. It's very scary. One push of a button, I guess.
Yeah, and then everybody pushes their buttons.
It's quite manic.
Insane. It is not a measure of sanity to accept insanity.
It's not a measure of insanity to
No,
accept.
it's not a measure of sanity to accept the current insanity, which we take for normal. It is a psychopathological state, a collective insanity, which we call normal.
On a personal note, another thing that I read that I think can benefit. So a lot of the goal is to take personal stories that other people can benefit from also. I saw in a random interview, you talked about, and the host also, she was like, you? And it was, you said you were addicted to cigarettes and, what was it?
Alcohol.
Alcohol and cigarettes.
But periodically. Cigarettes I was addicted to, alcohol on weekends.
Okay.
That was another incarnation.
How did you deal with those addictions?
Well, it's a very interesting story. I was this is in my 20s, I'm now 75. Okay. So one day I had put a patient on a respirator, put a pacemaker, put him in the ICU. I walked outside the hospital, lit up a cigarette. I was disgusted with myself, shame. Threw it, never went back.
How interesting. And do you believe, doctor, that people resort...
By the way, that was also very trendy. When I was training as a doctor, intern, residents, everybody used to smoke in grand rounds in the hospital. Doctors wore white coat, stethoscope, and we advertised in medical journals for Lucky Strike and Camel cigarettes, unfiltered, as giving you more energy.
The image.
Yeah, so we were part of that crowd.
Do you believe, doctor, that people or humans resort to whether alcohol or cigarettes or drugs as escapism? Is it a fair statement?
I've come to the conclusion that addicts are actually very spiritual people. They're searching for ecstasy, they're searching for joy, and this is their route. When I have a lot of interest in addiction, treatment of addiction, I have focused on it. They're very spiritual people. They just are looking for joy. But addiction is when the memory of pleasure becomes painful. It's no longer pleasure anymore, it's now painful. But the memory overrides. We are victims of memory. That's what karma is, by the way.
And is it fair to say, according to what you said, that addicts are spiritual person, but they're just using the wrong channels to reach spirituality?
Yeah. I had a very famous musician, a rock star addict, who had been an addict from the age of 15 to the age of 45. And then suddenly he discovered himself. He said, I moved from spirits to spirit.
How interesting. Doctor, you've been through a proper journey. God bless the experiences that you've had. I would say it's a blessed human being, I hope. Through that journey of learning about yourself and how to reach equanimity, did Dr. Deepak also go through depression?
In my training as a physician, yes. But it was, ultimately, although, by the way, there's something called the dark night of the soul that everybody goes through. I mean, there are various kinds of depression. So my first encounter with depression was actually, in a way, both existential and then later circumstantial. So I was about 6 or 7 years old when my father was in England. I was training as a cardiologist. And one day we got a telegram. My mother was also with him. And that he had passed all his exams. He was now a member of the Royal College, etc. And my grandfather, and I was living with my grandfather, grandmother, 2 bachelor uncles. One was a film producer in Bollywood. And we got a telegram that he'd passed his exam. So my grandfather, he went to the roof of the building, fired a gun. He was a World War I veteran. That was his way of celebrating. And then he took me and my brother to a carnival. We saw a movie, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. I still remember. Went to a restaurant. Then in the middle of the night, he died. And they took him to cremation. The next day, they brought some ashes in a jar. One of my uncles made the remark, says, what's a human being? Yesterday he was celebrating and today is a bunch of ashes. I had my first fear, existential crisis. My brother, who later became Dean of Harvard Medical School, Dean of Education, he was 4 years old. His skin started to peel. And every doctor that we went to was unable to diagnose till some healer said he's feeling vulnerable, he's feeling naked, so he's shedding his skin, metaphorically speaking. When his parents come back, he'll be fine. And so it happened. So I think in hindsight, that was my first depression, existential crisis. In medical school and early training, a lot. Most people get immune to this, but you see death all the time. You see suffering all the time, especially if you're working in an emergency room. Every hour or less, you become very immune to it. You crack jokes about it. And so I had all those, and that's why I think in hindsight, we all smoked and, trying to deny the suffering that we saw around us. So the answer is yes. And then there's something that happens actually even on your spiritual journey when you find out that you don't have an identity. That's very scary. Okay. who is Deepak Chopra? Which body, which mind, which personality? Looking back, I can't recognize the child, the baby that sat on its mother's lap and she was singing songs. Where is that entity now? Okay, so you go through that crisis too. It's well known in religious traditions, dark night of the soul, St. John of the Cross, old age, infirmity, death. These are things that everybody has to go through at some point. But then, if you cross over, there's equanimity, because actually it's wonderful not to have an identity. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to fight. You see the humor in everything, the contradiction, the paradox, the ambiguity of your existence, and the creativity of it all. Because, who's it? I think I'm maybe not quoting exactly, but Freud said the definition of neurosis is the inability to tolerate ambiguity, when our essential state is just that. We thrive, yearn for certainty, when actually everything is uncertain. And without uncertainty, there would be no creativity. If you were certain, again, we go back, you're an algorithm then. Which is the fashion of the day.
It's just so boring.
Yeah, very boring.
You've been married to Rita over 50 years.
Yeah.
How lovely. So I would love to ask you then the question, what is your definition of love? What is love to you, Doctor?
Freedom. Freedom to be just as you are. The positive and the negative. And understanding that that's love. Total acceptance. Now you can add things to it. Attention, deep listening, appreciation, gratitude, affection, caring. But beyond that is only one thing, acceptance.
That's lovely. And you managed to reach that with Rita on both ends?
She's like that too. I mean, if you want to really know what a person is like, ask their wife or their husband or their children.
Yeah. Then, Doctor, how come so many love attempts or relationships or marriages break so
because
easily?
they're not love, they're self-importance. The whole conflict is self-importance on both sides. Everybody asks, do you love me? Instead of, they say I love you, but they also ask, do you love me? Right?
Or at least expect it.
Expect it, yeah.
And they don't say I love you too, they're like,
Yeah.
why didn't you say I miss you too? You're like,
Yeah.
because at this moment I don't?
Yeah.
And they'd get offended.
Yeah.
So it's a transaction.
It's a transaction. Everything is a transaction in our society.
I saw, I think, a video of Mike Tyson. Man, TikTok sends me so many cool videos. We underrate TikTok. It knows what I like. So I think I saw a video by Mike Tyson, and he was talking about how we seek the love that we receive from our mothers as men. And it's a very delusional thing, because the mother loves you with, let's say, the least or the most unconditional love you'll ever experience probably is a parent or a mother to
100%.
And he's like, we seek that in our lovers, yet we will never get it, so it's always disappointing.
Yeah.
And
then you go to analysis, and then you spend the rest of your life saying, my mother never loved me, although she did.
Yes. How interesting. So what would you give advice to people who want to, like they have the good intention of having a healthy relationship or healthy love?
I would say, we have a program in our foundation for teen suicide prevention.
Okay.
Because it's now in the West anyway, it's the second most common cause of death in teens.
Wow.
Every 40 seconds, somebody in the world is dying of suicide. So we created a program called Never Alone. Check it out, neveralone.love. And actually we had an emotional AI as the counselor.
Okay.
And so it's not a human being, it's a bot.
Yeah.
And we found that teens are more willing to talk to a bot because they don't feel judged. There are millions of conversations happening with this AI simultaneously because it's a machine. And what we are creating is an ecosystem online and offline around, called Never Alone, around 4 A's: acceptance, attention, appreciation, and affection. And say, you give this to a person and they give to other people in their life. Let's create a pandemic of happiness in the world. The only cure for all this suffering in the world is joy. Joy should be the only measure of success and well-being. Otherwise, you've wasted your life. All the money, all the wealth, all the prestige. If you don't have joy, what good is it?
Yet a lot of people are stuck in relationships that are at least 70% joyless, and they
Totally
stay,
joyless, totally
or if
joyless.
not more, and they stay. And that's also, I guess, the fear of the unknown and the fear
Also the fear of society, the fear of judgment, the fear of the culture, it's all that. There's a lot of that.
Have you, Doctor, ever took a Kokology test?
A what test?
Kokology.
I don't even know what that means.
Give me. It's a beautiful test. I'm like, maybe he knows it. But anyways.
Don't even know.
It's a nice one.
If there's one thing
No, I'll read this for you. This is my analysis. If there's one thing, what? You were going to say something.
I don't enjoy his tests.
Well, this is a fun one. This is very creative.
Okay.
So you're a creative soul, so I think you like it. So this one, Doctor, is done by...
Where does the word come from? Kokology.
It's, I think, Japanese, because the guy is a Japanese psychologist, Tadahiko Nagao, and he did this thing. It's a beautiful question that I ask some of my guests, the ones I'm really curious to see or I feel applicable to. So it needs your imagination. So whether you like to imagine with your eyes closed or open, it's up to you. We start? All right. So I'd like you, Doctor, to imagine a very quiet desert, still, and suddenly, Doctor, you see a cube appear. And I want in your imagination, as vividly as possible, to tell me, how does this cube look like?
Infinite shapes.
The cube.
A cube can assume infinite shapes. In my imagination, I can make it a circle, I can make it multi-dimensionless, I can make it disappear, formless. And so when I look at anything, I first, even right now, I turn you into without form. Without form is infinite, because anything that has a boundary is finite, right? It's actually unimaginable because there's no form. Now I can make anything out of it. So I can take a cube and make a rainbow out of it.
Okay, and is this object or cube, because I've never got this answer, is it big, small?
I can make it big or small or disappear from. It's boundless in the atom and it's boundless in the universe.
Okay.
The fact that I see it as a cube is my limitation.
Okay, we go to the next part. The next part, Doctor, is you see a ladder. And a ladder appears in this image in your mind. Desert, cube, ladder. Where is the ladder in all of this?
The immediate thing that comes to mind is like a double helix,
Okay.
the code of life. And so the ladder is actually a metaphor for the code of existence that is recycling and evolving.
So it's a very tall ladder.
Infinite.
Lovely. New or old?
Timeless.
I like these answers. Okay. Third thing that appears is a horse. Describe the horse.
Strength, grace, beauty,
Okay.
freedom,
Is it still? Is it prancing? Is it running?
galloping.
Galloping. Away from the cube and the ladder, or towards, or around?
It's dancing on the cube, which is also moving with it.
Okay. Last thing that, no, not last thing, before the last thing that appears is flowers. You see flowers come up. Where?
In a mirage.
Many, little.
They bloom and they fade.
Okay.
Every time one blooms, another fades.
And is it like healthy or wilting?
Both.
Okay. Last thing, a storm appears. Where is the storm?
All I can say is I'm the eye of the storm, which is equanimity
Center.
in the middle.
And is it affecting any of the things that we described? The flower, the horse, the ladder, the cube?
Yes, it is what I call creative chaos, without which there would be no evolution.
Okay. So I'll go to my help just to get it as accurate as I can. So very interesting answers, by the way, doctor, if not the most interesting so far. So the cube is a sense of self or ego. And there's no explanation here, but I can dabble with you. If a cube is big, then you know that the ego is big, or a very confident or bold person, or somebody who wants to be, shown, or very notable. And a smaller cube.
That symbol, yeah, everything that we call reality is a symbol. But reality is beyond symbols.
That's why I liked your answer. You said it's formless.
Yeah.
It can be small, it can be big, it can be different shapes. So I guess your sense of self is limitless. It's malleable.
Infinite possibilities, yeah.
Which I thought was lovely. The ladder is usually, this was interesting, it's family and friends. And you saw it as an infinite thing, and it was timeless, and it was
symbolic of existence.
Correct. And that's, I guess, your close family and your friends. There is that kind of view to them. You look, and it says if the ladder is very tall, that means there's the sense of people around you, and and if it's segregated from the cube, not leaning onto, because leaning can be reliance or over-reliance or over-dependence.
See,
if somebody tells you the leader,
my family is the universe.
Your family is the universe.
Yeah.
Nice. The horse is your partner. So she was galloping, and she was strong, and
beauty, grace,
graceful. So I thought that was very nice. And he said it was around the cube, so which is around you. I thought that was nice. And the flowers are children, whether yours or the idea of children and the beauty of children. And he said they're in the mirage. And when somebody blooms, somebody goes. And you reminded me of a beautiful saying. Somebody told me where life is us giving to our children life while ours is dwindling and theirs is blooming. And when you explained the flowers, I connected to that.
Move your hand just now. Every ancestor is here right now. Since the beginning of life. All your human ancestors, all your animal ancestors, all your bacterial ancestors, going back to the beginning of life without a single break in chain. You want their activity, their genes, and the matrix of relationship of their genes. You can't move your hand, you can't speak, you can't do anything. So all of life is in you right now.
So interesting. And the final thing was the storm. This was an interesting answer. The storm is your fears and stresses that you can feel in life, right? And you said I'm in the middle, I would really call your word. You're in the I, meaning I felt it was equanimity, it's at peace. Even though it's everything around you, you're probably sitting there and you're not troubled by it.
In the midst
but you're
chaos,
celebrating the chaos.
Deterministic, creative chaos.
Nice answers, Doctor. What makes you, Doctor, afraid? What are you afraid of, if any?
Right now, no. I look forward to the next journey, which is called death.
You look forward to death?
Yes, death is resurrection.
Tell me what you mean.
I look at death as creativity. New context, new meaning, new story, new relationships, or maybe the same relationships, but new wine in new bottles, new casks. Without death, we would all be doomed to eternal senility. So death is a way of recreating ourselves, just like children is a way of recreating yourself. They're in you, just like all my ancestors are in me.
And Doctor, what makes you feel of value or valuable today? Like what? Because human beings like to feel of use and that they bring value. What makes Dr. Deepak feel valuable in life?
If I can help people unleash their greatness, which is infinite, I feel of value.
Okay.
That everyone has the potential for greatness.
Is that a cliche statement that you think, is it really true that everybody can be great, or some people can be great and some just can't?
Anybody can be great. Anybody can. But of course, we are imprisoned by conditioning, cultural conditioning, economic conditioning. It goes back historically to 30, 40,000. Human beings as humans, the human species and the human family has been around only for 100,000 years. Written language is less than 5,000 years. Oral language maybe 15, 30,000 years. And look what's happened, in this little short time. So we are not even infants. Forget about puberty. Puberty is to come, confusion is to come. Maybe one day we will find where we started from. That poem from T.S. Eliot, we shall not cease from exploration. And the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from and know the place for the first time.
What is the happiest moment in your life so far?
Having children, when they first showed up, it's a big mystery.
Played with your mind?
Yeah?
Played with your mind?
Yeah. To see a newborn baby is actually an amazing, wondrous thing. A newborn anything.
Yeah. It is, I think, like a miracle.
It is.
Yeah.
Actually, existence is the only miracle. And once existence is a miracle, then everything is a miracle.
I have a side question. For somebody who I will consider very knowledgeable, very insightful, very curious, what do you think? Do you think it's a need for human beings to have a partner, to have a wife, or if you want to call it a partner, or is it a need, or is it a want? Or some people, they should, no, I don't need to be committed or attached to another person until death do us part. So why would Dr. Deepak be married?
If you look at nature, there are very few monogamous species in nature.
Yes.
But there are. There are...
Think penguins?
Penguins, certain species of birds. And so in humans, it's a cultural... Monogamy is a cultural creation and a useful one. because you have children, you have to have a family. The culture has to survive. Are we that innately? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
You will like the documentary Doctor on Netflix, 16 minutes, 1/6, and it's called Explained. I don't know if you've ever come across it. Explained is a very nice series of mini documentaries, like 15 minutes, 8 minutes, whatnot. One of them is about monogamy and polygamy. Very interesting and close to the words you were just saying.
Yeah.
You'll enjoy it.
I will see it.
Yeah, it talks about our nature versus why it's useful. And somebody said it very nicely. He said, he believes, he's like human beings. He said, I believe that human beings are not monogamous by nature. They're polygamous by nature. However, it's a choice to be monogamous. It's like being on a bad diet, or you choose. You can eat anything as a human, as a creature. You can eat anything you want. But you choose to eat healthy. You choose to live better. It's a choice. And he said, I see monogamy this way. It's a better choice to be healthy, whether it's STDs, whether it's building a family. Or
Unless you're a nomad, unless you're maybe those primitive societies were happier. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's just a question.
Yeah.
What is your hardest moment so far?
At this, in my life.
Ever, yeah. Because we have your happiest.
Yeah.
Most difficult.
Again, taking the leap to be not going with the expectations of conformity in my profession. I was trained as a very rigorous scientific paradigm. Even my father was kind of disappointed when I took the leap, but later he realized it was the best thing I did.
Your father's name is
Krishan,
just to say it right. If you had to summarize your father in one word, which word would you choose?
Healer.
Healer. And because of his profession?
Yeah, but he actually was a healer. He was profession. He was, in his later years, he was a military doctor. But on weekends, he saw patients free of charge. And they came from all over the country to see him because he's very famous. My mother would cook food for them. And then when they left, they would make sure that they had enough money for their train or for their bus ride. And not only that, they prayed for their healing, even though he's very rigorously scientific. So he was a healer.
And Pushpa?
Pushpa
in one word.
Storyteller.
Nice. Rita?
Matriarch, not only of my family, but extended family.
Lovely.
Society, in many ways.
And Gotham?
Storyteller. He tells extraordinary stories. I mean, although his company, which he has with Tom Brady, is called Religion of Sport. But it's not about sport. It's about adventure and story and human potential.
And Malika?
She's like Rita, matriarch.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's taking over.
Okay. If you know that your death is arriving, what would your last words be? What would you choose?
He's gone, but there is a fragrance that lingers.
Which is legacy?
A fragrance, and then it'll be gone.
I like that
as
more.
It should.
As it should. And I have a hypothetical question. I love, Doctor, that you're this beautiful combination of science and creativity. Like your background is so scientific and you studied it, and then you're like, you know what? Let me mix this with life and mystery and art. So I want to play with your imagination. So this is a very basic hypothetical question, and it is, if I take Dr. Deepak's heart and I place it in front of you, what would your heart tell Dr. Deepak?
I quote from my favorite poet, Jalaluddin Rumi, exchange your cleverness for bewilderment. Bewilderment is the only holy experience. You know, scientific facts, what we call empirical facts, they conceal more than they reveal. For everything that you know, the unknown looms. And every step forward, the unknown becomes even more infinite. And beyond the unknown is the unknowable, because what we know is only through the five senses.
Correct.
Okay, and the five senses are a very narrow band of electromagnetic activity. You know, what does an insect with 100 eyes see? What is the fragrance of a rose to a snake that navigates through infrared? What does the world look like to a bat that knows the world only through the echo of ultrasound? Bewilderment. So, science is great for creating the simulation that we are in, but it hides the truth.
And
the truth is incomprehensible, unimaginable.
To us. I mean, as the limited being we are.
To any sentient being. Human or any, what is a sentient being? It knows its own sensations, that's it. Reality is incomprehensible, it's mysterious, it's infinite, it's without a cause, and we can call it anything. God, Ein Sof, Allah, Brahman. That's a nice way to actually surrender to this mystery, because there's no way intellectually or scientifically or philosophically you can comprehend it.
Have you enjoyed your story in this life so far?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I'm sure. Final question. Deepak in one word.
Well, the word actually means light. I would like to think it means light of awareness.
Light of awareness. Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
This was very interesting to me.
Yeah, I hope you don't edit much, right?
No, like hardly ever.
It would be
Unless
good.
somebody says, like this is the beauty of the interview, it's long form.
Yeah.
It's doctor, it's...
No, it's one of the most interesting I've done, you know.
That's a pleasure to hear.
No, I've done many interviews.
It's a pleasure for me.